Pandora's Box, The Ultimate Sacrifice, A Dark Tale of Evil. Elena had only been in the village for a few days. She didn't like it much. It was too quiet, too old. The people seemed strange, always whispering when they saw her. They looked at her like she was different. The village was near a big forest, and the forest had a name, Wood. The villagers spoke about it often, but they never told Elena why. They said Wood was cursed. They said it was dangerous to go there, but Elena didn't believe in curses. She had always been the curious type. She was not afraid of the unknown. If the forest was hiding something, she wanted to find out what. One day, she decided to walk into the woods. It was early in the morning when Elena left the village. The sky was gray, and the air was cool. The trees in the forest were tall and thick, their leaves whispering softly as she passed. Elena could hear birds, but the further she walked, the quieter it got. The air felt heavier, colder. She almost turned back, but her curiosity pushed her forward. After walking for what seemed like hours, Elena found something strange. There, in a small clearing surrounded by twisted trees, was a stone box. It was half buried in the dirt, like it had been forgotten by time itself. The box was made of dark stone, its surface covered with old carvings that Elena couldn't understand. It didn't look like anything she had ever seen before. She bent down to touch it. The stone was cold, but something about it felt wrong. It made her heart beat faster. There was a faint glow coming from the cracks in the stone, but Elena thought it was just the light playing tricks on her. She pushed the box gently. It moved. The moment she touched it, a sharp wind blew through the trees, shaking the leaves and making the branches creak. The ground beneath her feet rumbled just for a second, and then stopped. Elena hesitated. She looked around, wondering if anyone else had heard the strange noise. But the clearing was empty. The forest was still. The box was calling her. She had to open it. Her hand shook as she tried to lift the heavy stone lid. It was difficult at first, but soon it slid open with a soft, grinding sound. Inside there was nothing but darkness. Elena stared into the box, waiting for her eyes to adjust, and then something moved. At first it was just a shadow, but then it became clearer. A small, thin creature crawled out of the box. Its skin was pale and wet, like it had never seen the light of day. It had no eyes, just empty black sockets where eyes should be. It opened its mouth, revealing sharp teeth, and let out a sound like a whisper. The whisper was cold, like ice. Elena stepped back quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what the creature was or what it wanted, but she knew she had made a mistake. She had opened the box. And now something was free. Suddenly, the ground shook again. Trees groaned and cracked, and the sky grew darker. A cold wind swept through the clearing, colder than before. The creature, still in the box, began to glow. The whispers became louder, like 1,000 voices screaming in her head. Fear filled Elena's chest. She grabbed the lid of the box and slammed it shut. The creature's glow disappeared, and the whispers stopped. But the damage was done. The forest felt different now, alive, and it was angry. Elena ran, her legs shaking, her mind spinning with fear. She didn't look back. But as she ran, she could hear something following her, getting closer, step by step. The forest was no longer just a forest. It was a trap, and Elena had opened the door. The next day, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the box. She had tried to forget it. She had told herself that she made a mistake, that whatever was in the forest was dangerous and should be left alone. But the memory of the box, of the creature with the empty eyes, haunted her. It was like a puzzle she had to solve, something she couldn't leave unfinished. The villagers seemed normal. They went about their daily lives, farming and talking in the streets, but there was something different about the way they looked at her now. They didn't speak to her like they used to. They didn't smile. Instead, they watched her closely, as if they knew something she didn't. They knew she had gone into the forest. Elena couldn't stop thinking about it. The box, the creature, the cold, dark feeling that had filled the air when she opened it. It wasn't just a box. It was something more. It was a trap, yes. But it was also something else, something that had been hidden for a reason. And now that she had opened it, she felt different, like she had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. The temptation grew stronger. Every night, when she closed her eyes, she could still hear the whispers in her mind, the voices calling to her, telling her to come back, to finish what she had started. On the third day after the incident, Elena couldn't take it anymore. She decided she would go back to the forest. She had to know what was in that box. What was that creature? Where did it come from? And what had she released into the world? As soon as she entered the forest again, she felt the change. The air was thick, colder than before. The trees stood taller now, their twisted branches reaching down like fingers. The ground beneath her feet felt soft, almost as if it was alive. Shifting with every step she took, Elena walked deeper into the forest, her heart beating faster. She knew she shouldn't be here, but the pull to go back to the box was too strong. It was like a voice, soft but insistent, calling her name, Elena. Elena. Finally, she reached the clearing again, the place where she had found the box. At first, it looked the same. The trees were still twisted and dark, the ground covered with wet leaves. But then Elena noticed something strange. The stone where the box had been was now empty. The box was gone. There was only dirt where the box had once been hidden. Elena's stomach twisted with fear. Had the creature taken the box? Or had someone else found it before her? She didn't know, but she couldn't leave yet. She needed to know. Just then, a sound came from behind her. A low, creaking noise, like something heavy moving through the forest. Elena turned around quickly. For a moment, she saw nothing. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a dark shape among the trees. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone. Slowly, Elena backed away. The movement grew closer, and she realized it wasn't just one shape, it was many, figures, shadows, all moving between the trees. They were too tall to be ordinary animals, too strange to be anything familiar, and they were getting closer. Slowly, Elena backed away. The movement grew closer, and she realized it wasn't just one shape, it was many. Figures, shadows, all moving between the trees. They were too tall to be ordinary animals, too strange to be anything familiar, and they were getting closer. Without thinking, Elena turned and ran, deeper into the forest. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she had to get away from those things. As she ran, the whispers in her mind grew louder. The voices were calling to her. They weren't just whispers anymore, they were screams. "Elena," one of the voices cried, "you opened the box, now you must finish it." Elena's breath was quick and shallow as she stumbled through the trees, tripping on roots and branches. She didn't look back. The sound of footsteps behind her grew louder. They were following her. She pushed herself harder, running faster, but her legs were beginning to feel heavy. The forest seemed to stretch out forever. The trees were closing in, their branches blocking her way. She was trapped. Then, suddenly, she found herself back at the clearing, the same place where the box had been. And this time, the box was there again. The stone box sat in the middle of the clearing, just as it had been before. Elena stopped. She was breathing heavily, her chest tight with fear, but the temptation was stronger than ever. The box called to her. It was like it had been waiting for her to finish what she started. The voices in her mind whispered again, this time clearer, more urgent. "Open it," they said. "Open it and all will be revealed." Elena stood still for a moment, her body trembling. Her mind screamed at her to leave, but her hands moved on their own. She knelt down and touched the cold stone. For a moment, nothing happened. The forest was quiet, the air was still. And then, with a soft, grinding sound, the box began to open again. The darkness inside seemed to swallow the light. The air grew colder. The whispers turned into a low, hissing sound. Something was moving inside the box. Elena felt a chill run through her bones. She had to stop. She knew she shouldn't, but she couldn't make herself stop. She had to know. And so, she opened the box fully, her heart pounding in her chest. The creature was waiting. When Elena opened the box this time, everything changed. The moment the lid moved, a cold wave hit her face. It felt like ice, like she was standing in the middle of a frozen ocean. She stepped back quickly, her heart racing in fear, but the box was already pulling her in, calling her closer. From inside the box came a sound, low and horrible. It was like a growl, but not from an animal. It felt like the earth itself was groaning, as if something deep underground was waking up. Elena wanted to close the box. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. The darkness inside the box seemed to grow, and she felt like she couldn't breathe. The creature she had seen before was no longer in the box, but something else was. Something bigger. The ground beneath her feet shook suddenly, making her stumble. She grabbed onto a nearby tree to keep from falling, but the tree was shaking too. Elena's eyes widened in terror. The forest itself was moving. Around her, the trees twisted and bent, their branches reaching down toward her like fingers, as if the forest were alive, hungry. The shadows grew darker, thicker. And then the whispers returned, but this time they were louder, more angry. "Elena, you have freed us," the whispers hissed. "Now the world will know what you have done." She felt something touch her shoulder, icy cold. It wasn't the wind. Elena spun around, but there was nothing there. She could feel the eyes of the forest on her, watching her, judging her. The trees groaned, and suddenly something fell from the sky. Dark clouds appeared, covering the sun. The sky turned black, like night had come early. The wind started to blow harder, and the branches of the trees whipped around violently. Elena couldn't hear anything except the howling wind and the low growl coming from deep inside the forest. The ground beneath her feet started to crack open. A fissure appeared in the earth, splitting wide. Elena backed away from it, her heart pounding in her chest. But the cracks spread quickly. Like they were alive, they snaked through the forest floor, and as they did, the trees began to fall. The old twisted trees were being torn apart. Then creatures began to appear. At first, Elena thought they were shadows. But no, they were real, and they were moving towards her. Some were tall, their skin pale and stretched tight over their bones. Others were smaller, crawling on all fours, their eyes glowing bright red. The creatures seemed to come from the very ground, rising up like ghosts, moving slowly but purposefully. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The forest was not just alive, it was full of monsters. The ground shook again, this time stronger than before. Elena stumbled and fell to her knees. She looked up, and for the first time, she saw the full horror of what she had released. From the crack in the earth, something big was rising. It was huge, like a mountain, but it wasn't made of rock. It was made of black smoke, swirling like a tornado. Elena could hear it roaring, and with each roar, the creatures around her grew bolder, moving faster. Their eyes locked on her. "You freed me," the voice echoed from the smoke. It was deep and dark, like thunder. "Now you will see what it means to be free." The creature was not just one thing. It was many things, a cloud of shadows, with thousands of eyes watching Elena from every direction. She couldn't escape. She couldn't run. The monsters closed in on her, and the sky above her darkened even more. Like it was being swallowed by the blackness from below, Elena stood frozen, her legs too weak to move. She had made a terrible mistake. The box had not just released the creature, it had opened a door. And now the door was wide open, letting everything out. The whispers were growing louder, and the creatures began to circle her. The trees bent lower, their branches scraping the ground, as if they too wanted to join in the madness. Elena's head spun, and for a moment, she thought she might lose control of her mind. The whispers were too much. Too many voices, all speaking at once, all telling her it was too late. But then something strange happened. The wind died down, the ground stopped shaking, the trees stopped moving, the whispers grew quiet, the creatures stopped in their tracks. Staring at Elena, waiting for something, in the stillness Elena could hear her own breathing. She looked around, confused. What was happening? Was it over? Had she done it? Then from the smoke the voice came again. This time it was not thunderous or angry. It was calm, almost pleading. "You must stop me." Elena blinked, unsure if she had heard it right. Stop it? How could she stop it now? The box was open. The forest was full of these things. She was surrounded. How could she possibly stop it? The voice continued, "The forest is mine, but you have the power to stop me. You have the key." Elena's mind raced. The key, the box, the creatures, everything was connected. The curse wasn't just in the box, it was in the forest itself, and now it was too late to simply walk away. The wind picked up again, colder this time, and the creatures began to move closer. They were watching her with those glowing eyes. The forest was no longer a place of mystery. It was a place of pure evil. Elena's chest tightened with fear, but there was one thing she knew for certain. If she didn't act now, the world, the entire world, would fall into this darkness, and it would be her fault. Elena didn't know what to do. The creature, whatever it was, had warned her. It had told her she was the key, but how could she stop something so powerful? She had opened the box, and now the evil inside was spreading, growing, touching everything around her. The forest was no longer just dark. It was alive in a way Elena couldn't understand. The air smelled different, thicker, like something rotting. The ground beneath her feet felt soft and wet. And when she looked down, the dirt was moving, like worms were crawling just under the surface. The trees seemed to whisper, but it wasn't the wind. It was like the forest itself was talking. "You released me, Elena." The voice echoed around her, low and terrible, "and now I will take everything." The creatures, those strange monsters that had risen from the ground, were spreading. They didn't stay in the clearing anymore. They were moving into the village. Elena could feel it. She could hear them howling from far away, their footsteps shaking the ground. They were hungry, angry. The first night after the box was open, strange things happened. The people of the village woke up to the sound of screams in the distance. At first, they thought it was an animal, or maybe a bad dream. But then the strange noises came closer, and they saw the shadows moving at the edge of the village. The trees at the forest's edge were no longer normal. They had changed. The leaves were black, and the branches looked like arms reaching for the village. Elena didn't want to believe it, but she could feel the evil spreading, like it was in the air, in the ground, and in the hearts of the people. As the night passed, the whispers grew louder, and the sky above the village began to darken, turning a deep shade of purple, like an old bruise. The next morning, the village was silent. No one went outside. The doors were locked. The windows were covered with cloths. But Elena knew it was too late. The forest was already there, and the creatures were inside, moving through the village, changing everything they touched. Elena had to warn them, but when she went to the village square, she saw what the evil had already done. The well in the middle of the square had been covered with black vines, their leaves like twisted claws. The animals were acting strange. Dogs barked, but their eyes were glowing red, and their fur was falling out in patches. The cats were gone. The people didn't dare speak to each other. They were too scared. As Elena walked through the village, she saw faces she didn't recognize. Strange, pale faces. Some people had started to change. Their skin looked thin, their eyes empty, like they had lost everything inside them. Others were whispering to themselves, muttering things Elena couldn't understand. Then she saw Lucas. He was standing by the old barn, staring into the forest with wide eyes. His clothes were torn and his hands were shaking. Elena rushed to him. "Lucas," she called, but he didn't move. Finally, he turned slowly, his eyes wide with fear. "It's already too late." His voice was barely a whisper. "It's inside us. We can't escape." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, grabbing his arm. "What happened to you?" "They came in the night," Lucas said. His voice was shaking. "The creatures, they took people. The ones who went outside. They're not people anymore. They're changed. They're part of it now. The forest is alive, Elena. It's using us. You set it free." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. She had to do something, but what could she do? The evil was everywhere, and it wasn't just in the forest anymore. It was in the people. It was in the air, the ground, the sky. It was inside. Then, in the distance, Elena saw something that made her stomach twist with fear. The children. A group of them was standing by the forest's edge, staring into the dark trees. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were empty, like they had seen something terrible. But it wasn't just the children. The villagers, the animals, the trees. It was like everything was changing, warping into something else. The land itself was sick. And Elena was the one who had made it happen. She had opened the box. She couldn't stop thinking about what the voice had said. "You are the key. You can stop me." And then the voice came again, not from the forest, but from inside her mind. It wasn't just one voice. It was hundreds, thousands, all of them whispering to her, telling her what to do. "Elena, you are the key. You are the only one who can stop me." Suddenly, she understood. The box had been a prison, a trap. The evil had been locked away for centuries. But by opening the box, Elena hadn't just released it. She had unlocked something even worse, something older, something more powerful than she had ever imagined. And now that power was spreading. It was taking everything, people, animals, trees, the very land itself. Everything was changing, becoming part of the evil that had been set free. Elena knew that if she didn't stop it soon, the entire world would fall under its control. The evil was growing, it was in everything, and it would not stop until everything was its own. The village was no longer safe. It was falling apart. The trees had grown too big, too close, and the forest seemed to stretch farther than it ever had before. It wasn't just the forest that was changing. The land was changing too. The ground was soft, like it was made of mud, and cracks were opening everywhere. Elena could hear the sound of the earth breaking. It felt like the whole world was shaking. The people in the village were no longer the same. Some of them had become like the monsters in the forest, pale and quiet, with empty eyes. Others screamed and ran through the streets, as if they were trying to escape from something. But there was no escape. The creatures were everywhere. They came out from the trees, from the ground, from the shadows. The air was full of the sound of their footsteps. The soft scraping noise of claws against stone. Elena ran through the village, trying to find the others. She had to warn them. She had to help them. But the village was changing too quickly. It was hard to tell where the safe places were anymore. The houses were falling apart, the roofs caving in, the walls cracked and broken. She could hear the cries of the villagers. Some of them trapped inside their homes, some of them outside, running from the creatures. She saw Lucas again. He was standing in the middle of the street, staring at the forest. His eyes were wide, his face pale with fear. Elena rushed to him. "Lucas, we have to go," she shouted, grabbing his arm. "It's not safe here anymore." He turned to her slowly, his face blank. He didn't seem to hear her. He was staring at something, but Elena didn't know what. She followed his gaze, and her heart stopped. From the edge of the forest, more creatures were emerging. They were bigger than the ones she had seen before. They were giants, their eyes glowing red, their teeth sharp as knives. Some were crawling on the ground, others were standing on two legs, moving like people, but they weren't people. They were something else, something dark. "Elena," Lucas whispered, "it's too late, we can't stop them. The forest is taking over." Elena shook her head. "No, we can still fight, we can still survive. We have to get to the old church. It's the only place left that might be safe." Lucas didn't move. He just stared at the monsters coming from the trees. Elena pulled harder on his arm. But he wouldn't come. She looked at the monsters and knew he was right. There was no time. They couldn't stand against them. But she couldn't stay here either. She turned and ran. The streets were chaos. People were running everywhere. But there was nowhere to hide. The creatures were coming closer. Elena could hear their breathing. Low and wet, like they were hungry. She could smell them now, rotting like dead things. They were closer. At the old church, the door was locked. Elena slammed her shoulder into it. But it didn't open. She turned to look behind her and saw that the creatures were almost there. They were moving fast now, faster than before. "No, please," Elena cried, banging on the door. She felt tears in her eyes. She couldn't let them die. She couldn't let this world fall apart because of her. Just as the creatures reached the gate, the door creaked open, and someone pulled her inside. She stumbled in, falling to the floor, and the door slammed shut behind her. Elena looked up. It was Miriam, the old woman from the village. She was holding a heavy wooden cross in her hands. Her eyes were calm, but there was something strange about her. She didn't look afraid. Elena looked up. It was Miriam, the old woman from the village. She was holding a heavy wooden cross in her hands. Her eyes were calm. But there was something strange about her. She didn't look afraid. "Come in, child," Miriam said quietly. "It's safe for now, but not for long." Elena stood and grabbed her arm. "Miriam, the village, it's gone. The creatures are everywhere. The forest is taking everything." Miriam nodded slowly. "I know, I have seen it before." Elena stared at her, confused. "What do you mean? How could you have seen this?" Miriam's eyes darkened. "I am not just an old woman. I have lived here my whole life. I have seen the curse. I have seen the evil that the box has released. It has been here for generations." "But the box," Elena began. "I didn't know. How was I supposed to know?" Miriam sighed. "The box has been in the forest for centuries. It has always been there. The people who came before you, they knew of it, but they didn't open it. They left it alone, but now," Elena shook her head, her mind spinning, "what do we do now? How do we stop it?" Miriam turned to look out the window. The creatures were now at the edge of the churchyard, their eyes glowing in the dark. They were watching, waiting. "We can't stop it," Miriam said softly. "Not by force. The evil is too strong, but there is a way. The key is not just the box, Elena. The key is the land itself. The forest is a prison. And the only way to stop it is to close the door, close the box again. But that will not be easy." Elena's heart sank. "How do we do that? The box is gone." "The box is not gone," Miriam said, looking back at Elena. "It is inside the forest. You must return. You must find the box again, and you must close it. But the creatures, they're everywhere. The whole village is." I know, Miriam interrupted, but you must do it. If you do not, the evil will spread. It will take everything. The world will be covered in darkness. Elena looked out the window again. The creatures were starting to move closer, their eyes glowing, their bodies shifting between the trees. The world was falling apart. She had to go, she had to try. Elena, Miriam said, her voice soft but firm, you are the only one who can do this. Elena nodded slowly. She took a deep breath and turned back to the door. She had to fight. She had to survive, for herself, for the village, for the world. The creatures were getting closer to the church. Elena could hear their claws scraping against the stone walls, and she could feel the ground shaking under their heavy steps. They were close, too close. Elena's heart raced. The village was already lost, but Miriam was right. There had to be a way to stop it. Miriam stood by the window, looking out at the creatures that were gathering outside. Her old hands gripped the cross tightly, but she didn't seem scared. She was calm, almost like she knew what would happen next. Elena, she said quietly, you have to go into the forest, you have to find the box. But how can I? Elena asked, her voice shaking. The creatures are everywhere. The forest is full of evil. I can't fight them. Miriam turned slowly and looked at Elena. You don't have to fight them. You have to be stronger than the evil. You must find the heart of the forest. That is where the box is hidden, and only you can reach it. Elena was confused. The heart of the forest? What do you mean? Miriam sighed deeply. The heart of the forest is where the power began. It is where the box was first hidden, long before your time. It is protected by the ancient magic of the forest. But now the magic is dying. The evil is corrupting everything. If you don't find it and close the box, the forest will consume everything. Elena's mind was spinning. Could she really do this? Could she find the box in the forest, in the middle of all the darkness and danger? She didn't know. But she also knew that there was no other choice. The creatures were already attacking the village. If she didn't try, everything would be lost. Okay, Elena said, taking a deep breath. I'll do it. I'll find the box. Miriam gave her a small, sad smile. I knew you would. You have the strength inside you. Don't be afraid. Elena nodded, her stomach in knots. She had no choice but to trust Miriam. The old woman had lived through the curse, and maybe, just maybe, she knew how to stop it. Before Elena left, Miriam handed her a small stone. It was smooth, like a pebble, but it glowed faintly in the dim light. Take this, Miriam said. It will help you find the path. The stone will guide you to where the box is hidden. Elena held the stone in her hand. It was warm, like it was alive. She felt a small spark of hope inside her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the key to saving the village. Maybe it would work. Elena turned and pushed open the door of the church. The cold wind hit her face, and she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The creatures were close now, but the stone in her hand seemed to give her some courage. She stepped into the dark street, and the creatures stopped for a moment. They didn't move. They were just watching her, their glowing eyes locked on hers. Elena felt the power of the forest all around her, darkness pressing in from every side. The evil was so strong now, it felt like it was inside her, pulling at her from every direction. But Elena didn't stop. She didn't turn back. She walked forward step by step, her eyes focused on the forest. She had to reach the heart of the forest. She had to find the box. As she walked deeper into the village, the creatures stayed still. They didn't follow her, but they watched. It was like they were waiting for something. Elena couldn't explain it, but she didn't care. She just had to get to the forest. She had to try. When she reached the edge of the village, she looked back once. The people were still hiding inside their homes, some too afraid to even look outside. They were trapped, and there was no way to save them unless she found the box. Elena ran into the trees. The dark forest swallowed her whole, the shadows wrapping around her like a thick blanket. The wind howled through the branches, and the whispers from the forest seemed to follow her, getting louder and louder. She could hear the creatures in the distance, but they didn't come any closer. With every step, the stone in her hand glowed brighter. It felt warm, like it was guiding her. Elena didn't know how, but she felt like the stone was leading her, like it knew where she needed to go. The deeper she went into the forest, the darker it became. The trees were thicker, their trunks twisted and gnarled, like they were reaching for her. The path was difficult to see, but the stone lit the way, and Elena followed it without question. After what felt like hours, Elena reached a small clearing. The air here was heavy, and the ground was soft with moss. She felt it. This was the place. She could feel the power of the forest, and it was like it was alive, watching her. At the center of the clearing was a large, ancient tree. Its roots were deep, and its branches reached high into the sky, covered in dark leaves. But at the base of the tree, there was something else. A stone altar, old and covered in vines. Elena could see something inside it. A box, small and made of wood. The box was just like the one she had opened before. The one that had unleashed the evil. Elena walked forward, her heart pounding. The stone in her hand glowed brighter as she got closer. This was it. This was the box. She reached out and touched the box. The moment her fingers touched it, the ground shook. The forest seemed to breathe around her, the trees groaning and the earth cracking. But Elena didn't move. She knew she had to close it. She had to put the evil back inside. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and pushed the lid of the box down. The moment it clicked shut, the ground stopped shaking. The air became still. The darkness that had covered the forest began to lift. Elena opened her eyes. The forest was quiet now. The whispers had stopped. The air was fresh again, like the forest was breathing for the first time in a long while. The stone in her hand stopped glowing, but Elena wasn't sure yet. Was it really over? Had she truly stopped the evil? She turned to look around. The creatures were no longer there, the trees no longer twisted in strange shapes. The forest felt still, peaceful, like it was finally at rest. Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't over yet, but she had done it. The box was closed. The evil was locked away, for the first time since she opened the box. Elena felt a small hope in her heart. Elena stood in the clearing, her hands still resting on the closed box. The air was still, but something felt off. The forest had calmed down, but Elena knew that it wasn't truly over. The evil was not gone yet. She could still feel it, like a shadow in her mind. She looked around. The trees were no longer twisted and dark, but the land still felt heavy. There was something in the air, something she couldn't explain. The creatures were gone, yes, but what about the people? What about the village? The stone in her hand had stopped glowing, but it felt warm, like it was still alive. She thought about the voice that had spoken to her before, the one that said, "You are the key." She had closed the box, but was that enough? Had she really stopped the evil from spreading? Was the world safe, or had she only bought it some time? Suddenly, the voice spoke again, this time inside her head. "You closed the box, yes, but you have only stopped the curse from growing for now. The evil is still here, it is inside you." Elena gasped. Stepping back, the voice seemed so real, so close. She dropped the stone and it rolled across the ground. Her heart began to race. "No," she whispered. "I closed it. The evil, it's gone." The voice laughed softly, a cold, horrible sound. "You cannot escape it, Elena. The evil is not just in the box. It is part of the world. It is part of you." Elena's head spun. What did that mean? How could the evil be inside her? She had closed the box. She had stopped the curse, hadn't she? But the voice was right. Something inside her was different. Her body felt strange, like it wasn't fully hers anymore. She could feel the darkness whispering to her, tempting her. It was like it wanted her to join it, to give in. She shook her head. No, she had to stay strong. She couldn't let it win. The villagers were counting on her. They had all suffered because of her mistake. She couldn't let the evil win again. She shook her head. No, she had to stay strong. She couldn't let it win. The villagers were counting on her. They had all suffered because of her mistake. She couldn't let the evil win again. But then the voice spoke again, softer this time. "You are the only one who can stop it, Elena. You are the key. The box is gone. There is no way to lock it away again. You have to make a choice, a final choice." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. What was the choice? What did the voice mean? She looked at the box, still lying on the ground in front of her. The trees around her were quiet now, but the darkness inside her grew stronger with every passing second. She knew what she had to do. If she didn't make the choice, if she didn't act now, the evil would consume everything. The world would be covered in darkness. The creatures would return. The village would fall again, and all of humanity would be lost. But what was the choice? What could she do? "You must choose," the voice said again, this time with an edge of desperation. "You can give yourself to the darkness. You can join me, and together we can rule the world. You will have power beyond your wildest dreams. You can stop the pain. You can make everything better. You can end it all." Elena shook her head, trying to fight the pull of the darkness. She felt it inside her, like it was pushing against her skin, pulling at her soul. She wanted to resist, but the temptation was so strong. But then a memory came to her. She remembered the people in the village, the ones she had seen trapped inside their homes, the ones who were still afraid. She thought about Lucas, about how he had looked at her with fear in his eyes. She thought about Miriam and how the old woman had believed in her. She thought about hope, about the small light that had still been shining even when everything seemed lost. She remembered how she had closed the box. She remembered how she had kept fighting. Even when the world seemed like it was falling apart, she had to keep going. She couldn't give up now. No, Elena whispered to the voice, her voice shaking but strong. "I won't join you. I won't let you win." The darkness inside her seemed to roar, but Elena stood firm. She thought about the people she had left behind, the village, the world. She thought about the future. If she didn't stop it now, there would be no future. The world would be covered in shadow, and the creatures would come again. She couldn't let that happen. But then the voice spoke one last time, its words cold and final. "You are the key, Elena. But the key has always been a choice. You can either stop the curse and sacrifice yourself, or you can let it live. You cannot do both." Elena's heart stopped. What did that mean? She could stop the curse. How? How could she stop the evil from spreading without giving in to it? She looked at the box. The decision was so clear now. The world could be saved, but it would come with a terrible cost. She had to choose, sacrifice herself and end the curse, or let the evil continue to spread. Elena knew what she had to do. It was the only way. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I choose to stop it," she whispered. "I choose to save the world." With those words, she reached for the box. She felt the darkness inside her fight back, but she ignored it. She reached out, and with all her strength, she opened the box one last time. The evil inside screamed, but Elena didn't listen. She held the box tightly, her hands shaking, and she gave herself to it. The darkness swallowed her whole. But as she felt the shadows close around her, she also felt the world shift. The sky above her began to lighten, the trees, the creatures. Everything around her started to fade. The curse was breaking. The evil was being locked away once again. Elena felt her body grow weak, but she knew she had done the right thing. The evil was gone. She had saved the world, but at what cost? Elena felt the darkness wrap around her like a cold, heavy blanket. It pressed down on her chest, made her feel small and weak. The voice inside her head was louder now, whispering things she didn't want to hear. The evil wanted her to give in. It wanted her to let go, to let it take control, but Elena resisted. She could feel the power of the evil, like it was trying to swallow her whole, but she held on. She remembered the village. She remembered the people who were still hiding, who were still alive. She remembered Lucas and Miriam and all the villagers who had placed their hope in her. They needed her. She couldn't let the darkness win. "You can't stop it, Elena," the voice whispered. "You're already part of it. It's in you. It's too late." But Elena refused to listen. She had made her choice. She had already decided. The world could not fall into the hands of evil, not again, not because of her. The darkness inside her felt stronger now, like it was tearing at her, trying to break her. But Elena didn't stop. She focused on the box, the thing that had started all of this. She thought about what Miriam had said. "You are the key." She was the key. But to stop the curse, to end the evil, she had to make the ultimate sacrifice. The world had to be saved, even if it meant she would lose everything. The box in her hands began to glow again, bright and powerful. The air around her grew heavy, and she felt her legs grow weak. The energy was flowing through her, filling her body with the darkness, but also with the light that could defeat it. Her breathing became hard, her chest tight. The pain was unbearable, but she kept her hands on the box. She could feel the world changing around her, shifting, breaking, but she knew what she had to do. Slowly, Elena closed her eyes. She prayed for the world, for the people she loved, for everyone she couldn't save. She prayed that her sacrifice would make a difference. She thought of the village, of Miriam, of Lucas. She thought of hope. Then, with everything inside her, Elena opened the box one last time. The moment the lid came off, the world seemed to freeze. Everything went quiet. The forest, the creatures, the wind, the sky, it all stopped. Elena felt the evil inside the box stronger than ever before. But she was not afraid. She pushed back against it. With all the strength she had left, "I choose to end it," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "I choose to stop it all." And then, with her final breath, she closed her hands tightly around the box. The evil inside screamed. The ground shook beneath her feet. The trees trembled, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. But Elena did not let go. She didn't stop. She held on with everything she had. Suddenly, there was a bright light, so bright it hurt to look at. The evil that had consumed the forest, the village, and the world began to fade. The dark creatures vanished. The trees stopped twisting. The sky above her started to clear. The world was changing, and then there was silence. The evil was gone. Elena felt the weight of it all lifting, like a heavy burden that had been removed from her shoulders. The forest around her was no longer dark and twisted. It was calm, peaceful, the land was breathing again. The curse was over. But Elena didn't feel strong, she felt weak. The power of the box had drained everything from her. The energy she had used to stop the curse had taken her last strength. Her vision blurred, and she sank to her knees. She was so tired. Her body felt like it was made of stone. But she knew that it was over. The world was safe again. The village was safe again. She smiled softly to herself. She had done it. But as the last of her strength left her, Elena felt the darkness pulling at her again. She could feel it trying to take her. But it was different now. She didn't feel scared. She felt peaceful, content. She had saved the world, and that was enough. Her eyes closed, and the last breath she took was calm. The villagers stayed with Elena for hours. Lucas couldn't leave her side. He looked at her peaceful face, and he wanted to believe that she was at rest. She had saved them. She had stopped the curse. She had sacrificed everything for them. But even as he sat there, his heart heavy, something in the back of his mind made him feel unsure. Was it really over? The sky above them was still clear, the air fresh. The trees stood tall and calm. The creatures that had attacked the village were gone. The curse had been broken. Yes, but something still felt off. Something in the silence made him uneasy. Lucas stood up and looked around. The forest was peaceful now. But the shadows between the trees seemed a little too dark. The ground beneath his feet felt a little too still. There was no wind, no birds singing. The forest seemed almost too quiet. Had Elena truly stopped the evil, or had she only delayed it? A shiver ran down Lucas's spine. He had to know. He couldn't just sit here, pretending everything was fine. He had to find out the truth. He walked slowly toward the forest, the peaceful trees standing like silent watchers. He couldn't help but feel like something was watching him. As he walked deeper into the woods, the shadows grew longer. He glanced behind him. But the village seemed far away now, like another world. He was alone with the trees, and then he saw something, a small shimmer of light. Like a spark, deep in the forest. At first, he thought it was just the sunlight shining through the trees, but as he walked closer, the light flashed again. This was no ordinary light. It felt strange. He reached the spot where the light was shining, and his heart stopped. There, hidden beneath the roots of a massive tree, was a small stone, glowing faintly. The same kind of stone that Elena had held in her hand before. The stone she had used to find the way to the box. The stone that had guided her. Lucas knelt down, reaching out for the stone, as his fingers touched it. A cold chill ran up his arm. He pulled his hand back quickly. The light from the stone flickered, and the shadows around him seemed to stretch, like they were alive. For a moment, everything was still. But then, deep in the forest, Lucas heard a sound. A low, deep growl. It was faint at first, but it grew louder. The air seemed to grow colder. He turned around quickly. The trees were no longer calm. They seemed to be moving, twisting, almost like they were alive. The ground beneath his feet shook again. Just like it had when Elena had opened the box. The same feeling of darkness, the same cold, pressing against him. His heart pounded. It wasn't over. The voice he had heard before, the voice that had tried to convince Elena to join the darkness, whispered again, but now it was louder, stronger, and it seemed to come from everywhere. You cannot stop it. You cannot defeat it. The evil is inside you all. It always has been. Lucas stumbled back, his breath quickening. The creatures were gone, yes. The curse seemed to be broken, yes. But there was something worse than all of that. The evil wasn't just a thing that could be locked away. It was part of the world. It was part of everything. And it was never truly gone. The stone in his hand burned with a cold fire. Lucas could feel the power in it, drawing him in. The evil wanted to be free again. It wanted to escape, to rise, to spread, and it knew that the only way to do that was to use someone else. You are the next key, the voice said, low and threatening. The evil is in you now. You cannot run. You cannot hide. You will be the one to open the box again. It is your destiny. Lucas dropped the stone, and it rolled away into the shadows. He ran back toward the village, his heart racing, but no matter how fast he ran, the feeling of the darkness stayed with him. It was in the trees, it was in the air, it was in him. He reached the village, his breath ragged, and saw the people standing there, waiting for him. They were looking at him with hopeful faces. But Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He wanted to believe that everything was safe. He wanted to believe that Elena's sacrifice had worked, but deep inside, he knew the truth: the evil wasn't gone. It would never be gone. It was inside them all, and sooner or later it would return. Someone would open the box again. Someone would make the wrong choice. The darkness would always be there, waiting for the next person to come and unlock it. Was Elena's sacrifice in vain? Was it worth it? Had the evil truly been defeated? The villagers gathered around, but Lucas felt distant. He couldn't stop looking at the shadows in the trees, at the light from the stone. He could feel it calling to him. Was there hope for the world, or was it already too late?